Welcome dear students. Today our topic for deliberation is forced migration and refugees in South Asia. The main objective of this lecture are to explain forced migration, to discuss categories of forced migrants, to discuss the issue of forced migration and refugees in South Asia, and finally to understand the main factors that are responsible for the issue of migration in South Asia. Migration is a process encompassing any population movement regardless of length, composition or cause, either across an international border or within a state. It also includes the forced migration of refugees, displaced persons, uprooted people and economic migrants. Migration is considered an important global issue, as roughly 1 out of every 55 individuals in the world is a migrant today. With access to modern transportation and telecommunications, more people are motivated and able to move. Migration and forced migration have been issues of growing international attention and concern. There are currently an estimated 214 million international and 740 million internal migrants, and these numbers have constantly growing over the past 50 odd years. Migration can be broadly divided into two categories. The first category is the migration of the better off for betterment. The relatively resource-rich people move from their native places to seek better living standards and earn higher incomes. The second category comprises those who are partially or fully pushed out of their places of origin due to adverse circumstances such as unemployment, poverty, resource crunch in rural areas, social exclusion, armed conflicts, violence, environmental pollution, etc. While the first category of migration is more voluntarily, the second is characterized by involuntariness. The migrants are forced to leave their homelands for specific compelling reasons. Reasons such as the absence of resources, unemployment, force the poor to move outside their places of origin, sometimes for a shorter duration and at times for several years. According to various reliable sources, one person is uprooted in every 2 seconds, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Currently, the global total of forcibly displaced people is over 68.5 million. Several different factors led hundreds of millions of people worldwide to leave their homes. However, all of these factors led to one common goal: to have a better and safer life. However, it's a crisis with significant international implications, from the risk of radicalization and political instability to the spread of infectious diseases, crime and illegal migration. Hence, some of the pertinent questions related to forced migration and refugees is primary focus of the current lecture. However, before discussing South Asia, let me begin by explaining the typology of the migration, forced and otherwise. Forced migration. Forced migration refers to the movements that refugees, migrants and internally displaced people make. These can be either within their country or between the countries after being displaced from their homeland. According to International Organization for Migration, forced migration is a migratory movement which, although drivers can be diverse, involves compulsion or force. Forced migration may occur within or across the borders of the nation state. Forced migration also refers to the forcibly induced movement of people. For example, when migrants are forced to flee to escape conflict or persecution or become trafficked. Refugees. Refugees are persons who migrate from their home country to another country to seek temporary shelter due to adverse events such as famine, persecution, religious intolerance, racial discrimination, or any other such reason. Such people cannot freely exercise all their human rights guaranteed in their respective countries or foreign country wherein they reside temporarily. According to the United Nations Convention on the Refugees 1951, as defined in Article 1A, refugee means any person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country, or who, not having a nationality and being outside the country of his former habitual residence, is unable or owing to such fear is unwilling to return to it. People become refugees when one or more of their fundamental rights are violated or threatened. Because of this, refugees receive several protections under international law. Refugees have a right to be protected by the country where they seek asylum and can't be forced to return their home. Although these rights are often violated, they also have the right to education, employment, health care, and freedom of movement under the UN's 1951 Refugee Convention. However, some implications come with being a refugee. It has also been observed that sometimes refugees do not permanently settle in the country where they seek asylum. Sometimes refugees leave because of economic hardships and go to elsewhere. Besides, there are other relevant categories such as internally displaced people, asylum seekers, stateless people, and immigrants. Now let me come to another relevant term, which is internally displaced people, sometimes referred to as internally displaced persons. Internally displaced people are the people who have been forced to flee their homes for the same reasons as refugees, but have not crossed an international border. Internally displaced people live in their countries of origin but are often afraid or unwilling to return to their home for fear of persecution. For example, Kashmiri Pandits left the Kashmir Valley in the early 1990s due to fear of prosecution and settled in Jammu province and are still living there. According to UN principles of internal displacement, internally displaced persons or groups of persons who have been forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence, in particular to avoid the effects of armed conflicts, situations of generalized violence, violations of human rights, or natural or human-made disasters, and who have not crossed an internationally recognized state border. Although many internally displaced people face the same difficulties as refugees, they are not granted the same rights under international law. An internally displaced person is a descriptive term, not legal. While assistance to the refugees is a legal requirement, the principles on internal displacement are non-binding. Asylum seekers, another category of the forced migration. Asylum seekers are people who fled their homes and claimed international protection, but whose status has not yet been determined. Every refugee begins as an asylum seeker, but not every asylum seeker will become a refugee. National asylum systems are responsible for evaluating and qualifying asylum seekers for international protection. Those who do not qualify for refugee status can be sent back to their home countries. Development displaces. These are the people who are compelled to move by the large-scale development projects such as dams, airports, mining, conservation parks, etc. Environmental and disaster displaces. These are the persons forced to migrate because of natural disasters such as floods, volcanoes, landslides, earthquakes, environmental change such as deforestation, desertification and degradation, and human-made disasters which include industrial accidents, radioactivity, water pollution. Trafficked persons. These are persons transported using violence, coercion, or by providing misleading information to exploit them sexually or economically. Another relevant term, which is stateless people. Statelessness means any person or group of persons who do not possess the nationality of any state. Statelessness is a significant international problem today. It arises due to several reasons, including discrimination against a minority group in a nation, failure to include all residents in the citizens' body when a state becomes independent or takes birth as a new state according to the law of state succession in international law, or due to the intra and interstate conflicts. These people are highly vulnerable in the free exercise of their human rights since they do not possess the nationality of any country. Though there are technical differences between refugees, displaced people, asylum seekers, all are yet described as vulnerable and disadvantaged sections of the society. Therefore, they are vulnerable to different kinds of physical and emotional violence. Now, coming to the main portion of the current lecture, which is issues of forced migration and refugees in South Asia. South Asia is home to over 2 million refugees, out of which 75,927 in Afghanistan, almost 1 million in Bangladesh, and near about 2 million in India, and 21,465 in Nepal, and 13,93,132 in Pakistan, and more than 800 in Sri Lanka. 7 out of 8 South Asian countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, which account for almost entire region's space and population, are refugees, migrant receiving and sending countries. The only exception is the Maldives. Against the region's 1.5 billion people, its tiny population of just over 5 lakh is little consequence. Afghanistan is primarily a refugee sending country, particularly since the 1970s when its politics entered into an uncertain phase following the ouster of its king Muhammad Zahir Shah. Bangladesh, which was earlier East Pakistan, has a long history of both receiving and sending migrants, in which both India and Pakistan are involved. Lately, it has been hosting refugees from Myanmar, earlier known as Burma. Bhutan has received migrants from India's Nepalese majority areas as well as from Sikkim, and sent refugees to Nepal and India as well. Being centrally located, India has received refugees and migrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, and also from Sri Lanka, and has sent refugees and migrants to Nepal and undivided Pakistan. Nepal has received migrants from India and Bhutan and sent migrants to India. Pakistan has received migrants from India and Afghanistan, and to some extent even from Bangladesh. During the 1947, Pakistan sent refugees to India. Sri Lanka has sent both Indian Tamils and Sri Lankan Tamils to India as two distinct categories. First, as unwelcome settlers in their country, and second, as refugees searching for the security from the Sri Lankan state's oppression. Despite this tremendous experience, the South Asian region has the unique distinction of having no legal regimes to guide its refugee migrant policies. Except for Afghanistan, no South Asian state has signed the UN Refugee Convention of 1951. But law or no law, no South Asian state has been ever unwilling to provide the shelter and relief to its refugees, migrant guests, even though their resources are limited. This is the region's yet another unique distinction. However, the categories often get mixed up because of the absence of legal regimes and migrants. Refugees, illegal settlers, or stateless persons become the same. Streams of migration and refugees. There are three streams of migration that are crucial in the context of South Asian countries. Internal migration, which is migration within a particular country. Intra-regional migration, which means international migration within the South Asian region. And international migration, which includes migration beyond the South Asian region. Now let me explain the term internal migration. Internal migration primarily includes those who move outside their native places to destinations within their own country, searching for employment opportunities, higher wages, and better and safer living conditions. The ever increasing flow of rural to urban migration is a principal constituent of this stream of internal migration. There is also a continuous stream of women migrants who move out of their native land after marriage to far off destinations and eventually enter their destinations' labor markets. Intra-regional migration. The second category is migration within the South Asian region. As per estimates in 2015, more than 85% of migrants in the region are those who migrated from one South Asian country to another. The region has a significant migration corridors such as Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Pakistan, and Nepal, India. Given the accessible cross-border transit possibilities between India and Nepal, India and Bhutan, and porous border with Bangladesh and Myanmar, India is the essential destination for migration within South Asia. As per the specific estimates, more than 3 million migrants from Bangladesh and more than 8 lakh migrants from Nepal are currently in India. Some of the significant refugee streams from neighboring countries such as Rohingyas and Chakmas also opt for India as an essential major destination. Pakistan, on the other hand, has more than 2 million Afghan migrants. As per an estimate by the UNHCR in 2016, there were 67,000 Afghan refugees in Karachi alone. There are also many migrants from Myanmar and Bangladesh, many of whom work in the fishing sector of Pakistan. There are about 3 lakh Bangladeshi and Burmese living in Karachi itself. Pakistan also has a sizable Indian population due to the partition in 1947. Now let me come to the stream of international migration in South Asian context. Large-scale migration of people for better employment, higher wages to the GCC countries is a usual practice in South Asian countries, especially in countries like India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. This Gulf-bound migration which started in the 1970s and 80s, has picked up momentum in the subsequent decades and now has a most crucial stream of international migration of South Asian countries. Along with this migration to Europe has also picked up momentum in the past few decades. A good proportion of these migrants choose developed countries of the West or skilled professionals. Some of them are also found in the categories of migration of the marginalized. For instance, nurses, domestic workers, construction workers, and factory workers working in far-off countries with political tensions are ideal examples of distressed migrants who essentially move out for attaining certain basic employment and income security. The other important section of the current lecture is the main factors for the issue of forced migration and refugees in South Asia. The major factors which are responsible for the forced migration in South Asia are socio-political factors, urbanization and regional disparities, agrarian-rural distress, climate change and natural disasters, development-induced displacement, etc. Now, let me discuss these factors one by one in detail, and I will begin by discussing the socio-political conflicts. As per the ranking of Global Peace Index 2018, South Asia is the second least peaceful region in the world, accounting for about 1/5 of all conflicts and conflict-related deaths in 2016. Civil wars and tensions between different religions and communities leading to persecution of minorities by dominant groups have found fueling migration of the affected people. The reasons behind the socio-political conflicts in the region include tensions due to differences of identity, religion, ethnicity, social group, language, and so on. To escape such conflicts, a large number of people are found moving towards other destinations. Many of these refugees and asylum seekers in South Asia are victims of civil wars or socio-political conflicts. These include Sri Lankan refugees who migrated to India during the Sri Lankan civil war between the LTTE and the Sri Lankan state forces, and also the Rohingya refugees who fled the violence in the Rakhine province of Myanmar. In the case of Rohingya refugees who are pushed out of Myanmar, religion is the prime reason for the expulsion and ethnic persecution. Afghanistan witnessed a series of political turmoil and social tensions in the past 4 decades. The Soviet invasion in 1979 and its withdrawal in 1992, which led to the emergence of Taliban in 1994, and the military intervention of the US in 2001 were all found leading to both external and internal displacement of the Afghan population. During the Taliban regime, religious minorities had to flee across national borders to escape from ethnic massacres. As in the case of Afghanistan, Pakistan was also affected by the Taliban regime, leading to the internal displacement of thousands of people from affected areas. As per the estimates of the Institute for Economic and Peace, Pakistan is the 4th largest terrorism affected country. Ongoing tensions between different sects of Muslims and between various political parties in both Pakistan and Afghanistan often prompt some of the affected people to migrate towards safer places outside and within their country. The political turmoil on account of civil war and uprising of militancy groups in the region led to a situation where migration across national borders becomes the only option for a major chunk of population. Tensions between the Sinhalese and Tamil population in Sri Lanka Maoist conflicts in Nepal, and social tension in Balochistan and Sindh are certain cases of this sort of forced migration. Yet another case is the forcible migration of the Hotshampa population in Bhutan in the early 1990s, following the implementation of 1985 Citizenship Act and the One Nation, One People policy by the Bhutan government then. Northeast India also provides a good example of internal migration propelled by ethnic tensions. There is a growing body of literature on the northeast migrants in India, which suggests that the younger people had to migrate from states like Manipur and Nagaland because of socio-political tensions to a far-off urban centers within India. And many of these migrants are youth who initially migrate for their education and eventually enter the labor markets of their destinations for better employment prospects. In South Asian countries, often the people of the same ethnic group or communities are found spreading across provincial and national borders. This borderless spread complicates the tensions further. The continuing conflicts between the Nagas in Manipur of North India is an example in this regard. Socio-political tensions also led to reverse migration in certain cases. Many migrants from other states had to leave Maharashtra when there was a strong move against migrants from other states. Unaccounted migration or refugee movement across national, provincial borders also led to tensions between the migrants, displaced, and the locals. Social tensions in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan following the large-scale influx of Afghan refugees is an example. Other cases include the conflicts between illegal Bangladeshi migrants and the local population in states like Assam and West Bengal in India. The persecution experienced by the Hotshampa community in Bhutan and the tensions between the Madhesis, an ethnic group of Indian origin, and the Nepali population following the earthquake in Nepal in 2015. Another important factor is the urbanization and regional disparities. In all the South Asian countries, rural to urban migration is a major category of internal migration. The availability of employment opportunities and higher wages prevalent in the urban areas prompt people from rural areas to migrate to those areas. With the advent of better transportation facilities and communication systems, these streams of rural to urban migration got further strengthened in the recent past. Along with this, deepening regional disparities within the countries in terms of degree of urbanization and availability of employment opportunities have been conducive to rural-urban migration. During the past few decades, the urban centers, small towns, cities and metros in South Asian region have witnessed a boom in infrastructure and construction. These activities provided the opportunities for the unskilled and semi-skilled migrants from rural areas. Further to this, there have been growing job opportunities in the urban centers and peripheries as workers in factories, shops, establishments, ancillary and support services, domestic services, street vending, security services, restaurants and so on. Migrant workers provide the continuous pool of laborers for these jobs in cities and towns, contributing to the development of urban centers. Therefore, the initial skewed development of a region further led to lopsided development, adding to the already existing inequalities. Agrarian crisis and rural distress, which is another major contributing factor towards forced migration and refugees in South Asia. In South Asia as a whole, a prominent share of population, depends on agriculture for employment and livelihood. The crisis in the agriculture sector act as the epicenter for distress migration. Volatile agriculture prices are a major reason that sabotages the rural economy. Many factors such as a lack of warehousing facilities, the absence of supportive price policies from the government, acute market competition from imported agriculture produces and so on cumulatively deepen the agriculture crisis within South Asia. After every harvesting season, a lot of marginal farmers in rural areas find it difficult to thrive further. This situation inter alia leads to large-scale migration of small marginal farmers as well as agriculture labor to other regions, mostly urban areas and into the non-farming sector. This migration becomes a method of survival for the most of these debt-stricken marginal farmers. Increasing incidence of suicides by small and marginal farmers and agriculture laborers in South Asian countries is a strong indicator of deepening distress in rural areas. As per the National Crime Records Bureau in India, more than 280,000 farmers committed suicide between 1995 and 2012. In Bhutan, an analysis of suicides according to jobs shows that farmers are the most vulnerable group. As per the data from the National Suicide Registry of the Ministry of Health in Bhutan, more than one-third, that is 34 out of 92 suicide victims in Bhutan in 2016 were farmers. Climate change and natural disasters, another contributing factor towards refugees and forced migration in South Asia. In almost all South Asian countries, natural disasters continue to be a major cause for internal displacement and forced migration of the people. Natural disasters ranging from floods, earthquakes, landslides, etc. have been frequently occurred. Tens of millions of people are migrating or being forced to displace in South Asia due to disasters brought on by climate change, and the number could rise threefold in the next 30 years unless countries in the region take some strong measures to mitigate the worst effects of global warming. According to the Cost of Climate Accord, displacement and distress migration, more than 62.9 million people in South Asian nations could be forced to migrate from their homes due to the climate disasters by 2050. This phenomenon, commonly called climate change, which is becoming increasingly warmer year after year, has become a major driving force behind the migration of the distress affected population. While this is happening all over the world, it is especially acute in the South Asian region. In many parts of South Asia, climate change is now increasingly manifested through unbearable temperature, highly variable and unpredictable patterns of rain, and overall increase in the pollution level. As per the World Risk Report 2011, countries like Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Pakistan are in the high vulnerability group concerning coping and adaptive capabilities. As per the Global Risk Index, Bangladesh is considered the second most disaster prone country. In Nepal, following the earthquake in 2015, thousands of people got displaced within the country or moved to India. Besides this, the earthquake also led to a nationwide political tension between the Madhese and the Nepalese. From 2008 to 2016, over 200 million people have been displaced around the world, while 1.3 million people in 2017 were internally displaced in India alone. Another major cause of forced migration and refugees in South Asia is the development-induced displacement. In South Asia, thousands of people are forced to leave their places of origin every year due to the loss of land and livelihoods, thanks to the development projects such as dams, irrigation, roads, highways, canals, mines, power plantation, and industrial development activities. A sizable number of population are also shifted due to the construction of new cities, towns, and urban centers. As metro cities and large towns are getting expanded into the suburbs, many of the erstwhile marginal and small farmers and agriculture laborers get eventually pushed out of their villages and join the pool of transit labor and footloose labor, who increasingly constitute major segments of migrant laborers in urban spaces. As per the certain estimates, various development projects in India alone have displaced around 50 million people, where around 16.4 million are displaced due to construction of dams, 2.55 million due to mining, and 1.25 million due to industrial development projects, and 0.6 million for wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. With 3,300 big dams being constructed in the last 50 years, the list of displaced people is never ending. These developmental projects have replaced approximately 40% of the tribal population and 20% of the Dalit people. To make matters worse, people had to withstand not only one but multiple displacements. To conclude, the contemporary situation of refugees, internally displaced people, and the statelessness in South Asia is highly problematic, as there are few, if any, national or regional mechanisms that can help them to redress their claims. Within South Asia, the history of migration is not new. People migrated for reasons of trade, livelihood, marriage, and various other socio-economic factors. Nation formation in the region was accompanied by the violence and conflict that affected the large sections of the people. The impact of this violence in 1947 continues to shape politics in the new nation states and have effects on both internal and cross-border migration. The worst affected are women and children, who are forced to bear the double burden of poverty and social oppression. Dear students, I hope you have understood and enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.